Deluxe Club members, we are going to dive into a step-by-step tutorial on how to create your project this month with this beautiful leaf project that stands on its own and creates amazing depth and beauty. There's so many ways that you could paint this, and there's no color combination that's going to be wrong. But I'll show you how I got this look, and let's dive in. All right, let's go ahead and get started on this project. So the first thing I do when I open my project is I go ahead and lay it all out into the different layers in order, and that way I know how it goes together. The second thing that I do is I look at my inspiration or just visualize what I want to do, and I put my paint on the colors that I want. So I'm going to do brown, then the copper, number 19, then the 17, then the bronze, and the gold. All right, so I have that as my example. You have your picture, you can have it off to the side, however you would like to do it. Personally, for me, I love to work from top to bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo my gold, and on anything that's very thin line like this, I always want to use my white sponges. So I am going to dip, scrape, unload, and I'm going to lightly hop over the fragile part of this first project. When I run out of paint, just loading again, and I'm keeping my touch really light so that way it doesn't go over the edges. Well, you could definitely paint all of your edges. It would be very, very tedious. So if you have a lot of time, that's great. If you don't, I would just be very light on your touch. And then if you do go over, you can soften it with a baby wipe or anything like that, and it'll just kind of take those little fuzzies around out. So once I get this first layer of gold on here, I'm going to start where I left off and go ahead and do my second layer. Dip, scrape, unload, hop, 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 and I'm just lightly hopping. I don't have any kind of brushing stroke here because that's really going to start having a risk of breaking these really fragile pieces. And it's more likely to go off the edges of the piece. All right, once I have that first one done, you can see it's just a nice coating. I'm going to put that off to the side. Then I have my second layer. For this one, I'm going to also do the bronze. So I'm going to dip, scrape, unload, and I'll do my white sponge as well because there's a lot of intricacies. So I'm going to dip and just lightly dab all over the leaf again. All right, once I get that one done, you can kind of start stacking them and seeing how things are going to come together. So I'm liking that. I might come back and add a second layer once it dries, but I'm going to see how that works out. Now I'm going to jump over to my orange, open this up, and I'm going to dip, scrape, unload, and just hop straight up and down. Again, this straight up and down movement really works best, and using the white sponge so that way you're not getting too much paint hiding in all of those little holes. Unload, hop, hop, hop. All right, so now we can go ahead and stack this next one. Starting to come together, I'm going to put that to the side. And I'll grab my number 19. Another sponge, dip, scrape, unload, and hop, hop, hop. Okay, so I got a little messy on the inside here, and I'm not going to worry about all of it, but since this edge does show, I just have a baby wipe, and I'm just kind of softening that where I got messy, and that way it does not show. And if I took away my painting, I can just add a little bit more. So if you're somebody that edges really bother you, that is a good alternative. All right, so now I'm done with my third layer here. You can see it's really starting to come together. And now I'm going to do copper. Dip, unload, and hop, hop, hop. All right, so I'm really liking how this is coming together. And all I'm going to do now is just my very back piece. And then I have to do my frame for the outer edge that you see here. But I'm going to do that the exact same way that I did the leaf. So when I do this backer piece, because it's so wide, I don't have to use the little tiny sponge. I can just use a yellow sponge, and I'm just gonna go with the grain and go side to side. If I leave it nice and thin like that, it's gonna kind of go on more like a stain. If I want it bold, then I'm going to do a second layer. So it really just depends on the look that you're going for. Obviously, when you talk about fall, stains are really popular. And so it's totally fine to leave it with that wood grain showing through, and you're kind of just using that Karate Kid mentality of wax on, wax off. So even though it's a paint, it's gonna kind of read as a stain. But if you want it nice and bold, just go ahead and take it another layer and it's gonna be nice and bold. So now I'm just gonna dip my sponge again and get that nice and dark. Okay, putting this off to the side. The only thing that I see from an artistic standpoint here is if I look at this yellow, it's really bold. And so it's where my eye is drawing, and I want it to draw to the center of the leaf a little bit more so. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of take that layer off, and I'm gonna use my distressing brush. I'm gonna choose to distress in the bronze. I'm gonna dip, unload really, really heavy. This is something that it's a lot easier to add than to take away. And then I'm just going to add lines back and forth, like big Tai Chi movements here. I'm just tickling my board with just the tiniest bit of paint on it. I feel like I have nothing on my brush. And by doing that, it gives it a little bit of that aged, rustic, vintage look, and it's gonna help distract the eye from being so in your face with that yellow. And so that way the leaf kind of still takes the center spotlight. And if you wanted, you could add a second color. Maybe I want to bring in a little bit of the orange and really mellow that second layer out. And then just kind of play with it, test it, see if you like how that looks. So you can already tell it just muted it enough, and you could take that even further if you wanted. So I still have to paint my frame, but that is the general concept of your project. When you go to glue it, you have your pot of glue, and you can use these little applicators to put your glue around all the edges that you see. For the purposes of this, I'm going to use our Star Bond Thick, which we do sell on our website. I like this glue because it stays in place. Well, it doesn't dry completely clear. It does do pretty well with that, and it holds very quickly. So for my short attention span, it makes it go a little bit faster. So when I'm gluing a layered project like this, I always put the glue on and then I dab it off on a piece of paper so that way I don't have any excess glue that's gonna push out from underneath the edges. So I paint front down and then I glue back forward. And that way I know I'm getting everything the right way. So around my edges, I'm just putting dots. I don't want a whole lot of glue, but I do want enough that it's gonna hold that frame down. And then I'm going to, again, unload on a nearby paper towel or the table. Line those up. I'm always pinching my corners to make sure I got them nice and even. Then doing your next layer. Again, I'm gonna do dots around the outside. Always unload. Line up those edges again. Sometimes you do want to hold down a little bit of pressure, especially with the summer. It tends to bow the wood a little bit, so downward pressure is good, or if you have clamps handy, that can be very helpful too. And you can see I'm not really worried about adding any glue to all these little intricate insides of the leaf because my frame and the edges are going to hold it in place. And that way I'm not distracting from the intricacies of the leaf or risking anywhere that glue could push out on all of that fine detail. When it comes to this little top one, I'm literally just gonna kind of coat the edges. And then this is where it's really important to unload so I know that that glue is not gonna push out. So I'm adding little dots and then I'm gonna circle it around all of my other stoppings here. That way it's a nice good sheen. And that's when I will line it up on my final project. Now I still have to go get my top edge, but you're gonna glue it on the same way, and then you'll end up with your final project.